Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to Approaches and Experiences in Micro-Credential Development and Delivery in BC. With the onset of the pandemic, many individuals found themselves out of work or in need of quick retraining, and many institutions took advantage of government funding that was made available at the time to develop short-term programs that enabled students to enroll and complete micro-credentials at a variety of institutions. When I attended articulation committees last spring, one of the questions that I received a lot was around micro-credentials. Who's offering them? How were they developed? And how successful have they been? What kind of enrollments have there been? What have been the outcomes? So to that end, we have brought together two speakers who are going to share how they successfully developed and implemented micro-credential programs. Our first speaker will be Ed Benoit, who is the Dean of the School of Access and Continuing Education at CNC. He's going to be telling us about CNC's approach to micro-credentials and how they adapted an existing program structure to quickly develop a micro-credential program to meet the needs of students. After Ed, we will hear from Eric Fry, Associate Dean, Agile and Work Integrated Learning at BCIT, who will share the story of how BCIT mobilized 6 schools across 5 campuses to quickly address the upskilling and reskilling needs of industry. He's also going to share some of the strategies and insights gained through the launch of BCIT's micro-credential programming. Like with all the other sessions, Eric and Ed are both going to be joining me at the top of the hour to field your questions. So please feel free to put them into the chat or the question and answer, and Eric and Ed will be able to help you with your answers at the top of the hour. Enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ed Benoit, and I am the Dean of the School of Access and Continuing Education at the College of New Caledonia. I'm coming to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Lheidli people. I've been asked to speak today about the approaches and experiences in micro-credential development and delivery here at the College of New Caledonia, or CNC. So to begin just by setting the context, back in 2020, we, as many of your institutions, had started to talk about future possibilities and potential of micro-credential offerings. But it was really the announcement of the British Columbia Micro-Credential Initiative in the fall of 2020 that allowed us to move from talking about this topic to actually focusing on it in a much more deliberate way. As you'll recall, the British Columbia Micro-Credential Initiative was focused on developing additional skills and competencies for British Columbians to successfully enter or continue in the workforce. It was to support access to further education, including stacking between micro-credentials and laddering between micro-credentials and other learning opportunities or traditional credentials. There was an emphasis here on what was needed by employers for employees in the labor market. So employer engagement and validation was a very important aspect of this initiative as well. And most importantly, part of the purpose of the Micro-Credential Initiative was to inform the development of a provincial micro-credential framework. And this was something that we here at CNC were very interested in participating in and contributing to. So at the institutional context here at CNC then, I mentioned we had started some preliminary conversations around the potential and possibilities for micro-credentials. At the time that the provincial initiative was announced, we were really limited by our existing CNC credential policy and procedures. And within that policy and procedures, we have 2 existing credentials that were really the closest to micro-credential type offerings. So on the one hand, we have a credential known as an associate certificate. An associate certificate is a fairly short credential. It's a minimum of 9 academic credits or equivalent. And then below that, we have a statement of successful completion. The Statement of Successful Completion credential is for educational pursuits that are not reviewed by Education Council. The minimum period of study for these is 6 hours. So again, fairly short term and consistent with the spirit and principle of a micro-credential offering. And it does include a formal evaluation of participants. So given the timelines that we had at the time in the fall of 2020, there really wasn't enough time from the announcement to the implementation here to establish a complete, fully new micro-credential framework at the institutional level. So these were the credentials that we were working with. And as it was, we decided to proceed with the Statement of Successful Completion. So the micro-credential offerings that I'm going to be discussing were offered as non-credit CE type offerings with a Statement of Successful Completion credential awarded for those who successfully completed the training. What we really looked forward to here, though, and what the real opportunity for this initiative was to engage with local employers in a very deliberate way, in a very focused way, about the potential for micro-credentials and about the implementation of micro-credentials. And once more, it also allowed us to participate and contribute to the development of a provincial framework for micro-credentials, and to align our institutional approach with that of the province. So that was a really important opportunity for us that we wanted to be involved in. We decided to move forward with 2 projects, both of which were approved, and we had a technology focus for our 2 offerings. This grew out of some previous conversations that were already taking place at our institution. Our educational administration leadership team had been discussing the future of work and the future of education. So micro-credentials as a flexible offering fit into that conversation, as did the need for digital skills and technology training, including a certain amount of literacy and fluency with data and data analytics. The technology focus, I think, was also reinforced by the pandemic context. COVID-19, as we all know, led many employers to shift to remote operations, and people were using collaborative software and other computer applications in ways that they had never done before. And so there was an emerging need, or very real immediate need, for employees to have the training and skills required to work in that context effectively. And so we went forward with 2 micro-credential programs. The first one was the Core Skills for a Digital World, which talked about applications around communication, collaboration, and the different uses of digital skills and digital literacy skills related to those uses of technology. And the second program was a Core Skills for Data Literacy. And this was really an introductory course into data analysis, data presentations for informing business decisions. So an introductory level kind of data analytics that was based in Excel, but it wasn't an introductory Excel course. It was very much about how to use Excel to manage, manipulate, analyze, and present large amounts of data for business purposes. So in terms of our approach to the micro-credential, really one of the key aspects of the initiative and of our approach here was the community employer engagement that was involved. So we started at the outset by assembling a community stakeholder steering committee that was set up really of a core group of employer and employment service and community organizations. That group and the discussions that happened with that group helped inform the design of these 2 programs, the setting of learning objectives, the establishment of the competencies that the students would work towards. From there, we took that information out and engaged employers on on a wider basis. So we used an employer engagement survey to seek validation of what we were proposing and to collect feedback from a broader range of employers. We continued one-to-one engagement with other employer partners. We also had a social media campaign to help share information and to engage with employers and community stakeholders. And the result of all of this was really a broad cross-section of feedback and input from employers across multiple sectors. So public sector and private sector. We had, public administration and local government. We had nonprofits. We had, private sector technology firms, private sector manufacturing companies, all of which helped inform the development of the micro-credential training. So in terms of some of the successes then and lessons learned, one of the things we learned along the way is that there was a strong interest in the skills training. And this is, I think, reflected pretty clearly in the enrollments that we were able to achieve for the two programs on fairly short notice. The turnaround for these programs was a matter of weeks. In our core skills for data literacy, we had a total of 53 students participate in two offerings, and they represented or came to us from 20 different organizations or employers. For the core skills for the digital world, likewise, we had two offerings, and there we had 27 student enrollments representing 16 different employers or organizations. So we had a very high level of student satisfaction with the training. In the core skills for digital world, we had a survey that we shared with the students, and fully 100% of the respondents indicated that they would recommend the course to others. And 92% of the respondents indicated that the training was directly related to their educational and employment goals. So really, really promising results, very similar results that we had with the data literacy course as well. Some other observations or lessons learned. When we talk of micro-credentials, we often speak of reskilling and upskilling. Our experience here was for the data literacy course, which was perhaps a little more of an advanced skill. This was subscribed almost entirely by working individuals, people who were already employed in positions that required the skill, and they were looking to this training to improve or enhance or upskill their competency level. So of the 53 students who participated in that program, fully 51 were employed in positions that were using these skills, and this was an opportunity for them to enhance and improve those skills. Numbers were similar, not quite as high with the core skills for digital world. So in that case, we had 23 of 27 individuals who were employed, and fully 100% of the 23 who were employed indicated that the training was directly relevant to their work. So moving forward then, consistent with the theme of our conference, as we chart a path forward here, we do have future plans for both of these programs. So we've developed learning pathways to build on these previous offerings. So the core skills in data literacy, we've developed or are developing subsequent courses in marketing analytics, as well as in big data. So a series of courses that students could move into after taking this core skills course to take more advanced levels of training should they require that. And on the core skills for the digital world side, what we identified at the time was actually a need for maybe a prequel course. So a course that maybe covered some more essential or foundational skills to bring students up to the digital skills course that we had previously offered. And so that is currently under development as well. And again, the idea here is to develop those learner pathways and laddering opportunities for the students. So lessons learned. So we collected feedback not only on the skills training itself, we collected some feedback from the employers and participants around the format of the micro-credentials and what they would like to see in a micro-credential framework. And so we asked specifically about digital credentials. We often hear discussions of digital badges. And we had a fairly strong response. In the one case, we had 67% of respondents indicate that yes, a digital format of a micro-credential would be very useful and desirable. The second question we asked was around the content of that micro-credential and whether the employers thought it would be useful to have a very clear competency statement as part of that micro-credential. And similarly, we had a strong response, 88% of respondents indicating that yes, a clear competency statement as part of the credential is something that they would welcome rather than just a course name or credits on a transcript. And finally, we asked about the principle of stackability and the ability of stacking micro courses together to lead to a larger micro-credential certificate, if you will. And again, we had very strong response that rather than leaving these as standalone courses that are recognized individually, 100% of respondents actually saw value in the micro-credential courses being able to be stacked to equal a larger micro-credential certificate, for example. So we took some of these lessons. We also engaged with the follow-up micro-credential framework stakeholder sessions that the province hosted and that BC Campus was involved in. And we've been active contributors to those conversations. And we've watched very closely to see the direction of the provincial micro-credential framework because we're looking to that to help inform our directions forward to develop and implement a revised micro-credential policy here at CNC. So that brings us to the institutional level then and our next steps for moving forward here. What we really want to do is digest some of our experiences and some of the information that is coming out at the provincial level around the micro-credential framework and incorporate that at the institutional level. So we would love to work towards, and we are currently engaged here internally, working towards the creation of a credential policy that allows for micro-credentials. And the hope there is to include micro-credentials that could be digital in format, that would include a clear competency statement, that could be stackable, just as some of the feedback from our initiative earlier this year indicated. And so I think we have some room in our current credential policy to do that between the statement of successful completion and our associate certificate. There appears to be a gap that micro-credentials could probably fill very nicely. So that work is underway here at CNC, and we're hoping to be able to move that forward and realize that here in the near future. So that's a brief summary of our experiences and approaches here at CNC, and I look forward to welcoming any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Ed. I really appreciate hearing the story at CNC about micro-credentials. Now, before we get to the question and answer, and thank you for everybody who's already started posting questions into the chat, we like to get another perspective on micro-credentials. And so I'd like to introduce Eric Fry, Associate Dean, Agile and Work Integrated Learning at BCIT, who is going to share the story of BCIT and how it mobilized schools across 5 campuses to address the skilling needs of industry. Please enjoy.
Good morning. My name is Eric Fry, and I'm the Associate Dean of the Agile and Work Integrated Learning at BCIT. This morning, I'm going to share how BCIT implemented our micro-credential initiative. So I'd like to share with you a quick video that we've put together from BCIT Business and Media Department. What are BCIT micro-credentials?
The future of work is changing. With evolving technology and emerging opportunities, BCIT now offers micro-credentials that align with industry standards and help you adapt to industry needs. Micro-credentials are similar to BCIT's part-time and full-time courses, but instead these courses can be completed in a span of up to 4 weeks. They provide you with a certification that is applicable directly to your resume and adds digital badges to your LinkedIn profile. If you're looking for fast, flexible learning, micro-credentials are ideal for obtaining additional skills and help build resilience in modern Canadian industries. You can start by taking one micro-credential course and then further your education by either pursuing additional badges or ladder into a certificate. To maximize your success, BCIT is equipped with instructors that bring real-world expertise to their classrooms. Whether you're seeking to learn a new skill set or simply want to stay ahead of the curve, you can at BCIT. Micro-credentials are geared towards advancing your career, building your resume, and maximizing your investment.
BCIT has 5 campuses that are located in the traditional territory of the Coast Salish Nation, the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people. Today I'm speaking from my home located on the Coquitlam people's land in the Coquitlam watershed. Our schools have a history of meeting industry needs with the respective sectors. We're looking for a collaborative pan-institute method of supporting Agile initiatives. Many of these schools have overlapping priorities and content that together can create new and innovative multidisciplinary training opportunities for what BCIT is known for, practical applied industry recognized training. Problem, how do we collaboratively mobilize 6 schools, 5 campuses, 2,500 full-time, and many more part-time employees to quickly address upskilling and reskilling needs of industry? What we needed was a central pan-institute micro-credential organizing and approving model. From this need for a pan-institute engagement, the BCIT Agile and Will Initiative Department was developed and implemented. As the AD of this relatively small department, I collaborate with other ADs, share best practices, and identify and support opportunities for collaboration to meet industry needs through badges, micro-credentials, flexible part-time studies, and work integrated learning. I work along with associate deans in many different schools. We have many different, of the 6 schools, we have many different associate deans within each school. And so the associate deans are responsible for the delivery of the course content, but I work as an associate dean in partnership with them to look for these opportunities to share best practices and collaborate and remove barriers. Our definitions of badges and micro-credentials are short, stackable, transferable, and agile training opportunities, complementing existing programs and achieving an industry reskilling and upskilling need. We think of them as a menu complementing what we already have. We're not looking to disassemble our existing full-time programs. We're looking to provide entry options or appetizers for our entrees, which are our existing programs. We're also looking for specialization endorsement opportunities within our full-time programs and post-program opportunities for professional upgrades with badges and micro-credentials. We really do need to try to tie these to industry needs. That's our goal, rather than taking apart all of our objectives and learning outcomes within all of our different courses and badging them all separately. When we're referring to badges and micro-credentials, the badges are obviously smaller, 0.5 to 3 credits, digital certification. We're using Badger as others have also been using. Our micro-credentials are larger, generally 3 to 9 credits, and can be assembled through a multiple assembly of badges. These, for those that are not familiar with Badger, it is an external app that we have access to issue these credentials through. And we email the students with access where they can download their badge and put it in their digital backpack on Badger. They can print it, hang it on their wall. They can put it in LinkedIn and other ways of sharing what they've accomplished. We've used a standardized format of the Eagle for our badges and the torch for our micro-credentials. And we reformat them, these credentials to include the name of the course. And of course, they have the metadata built in within them of what they've achieved. We've done some thought into how to create these micro-credentials. These are similar to our statements of completion prior to the Micro-Credential initiative, which we did many at BCIT in supporting industry need. Statements of completion do not go through our Education Council, and neither do badges or micro-credentials. We've looked for a more adaptable, agile method for implementing these quickly. So badges are approved by the associate deans in respective program areas. And the micro-credentials go through a little bit more intensive process of going from the associate dean through the school quality committee, and then shared by Dean's Council to get a pan-institute sort of perspective from the other deans to be aware of what's going on in the different schools and the different departments. Our initial pilot tested 3 different types of micro-credential models. We did this last winter and spring, January through March 2021. And we specifically chose 3 different methods to try. Our digital transformation is a menu of small courses, of which I believe there were about 15 courses. There were about 15 courses. And when students completed 4 of them, they would be issued a micro-credential. Some of these courses in digital transformation were such things as networking foundation, YouTube marketing, e-commerce, 5G, etc. A different model we used for essentials of natural resource and environment protection was the collaboration model with VIU. So this one focused on the theory and practice of conservation management and applied skills. Had 7 online courses from a mix of instructors and professors from both VIU and BCIT. 70 students went through that model successfully, and of course in digital transformation, 375 students went through that one, which was our biggest cohort that went through. And the third style of micro-credential we used was sort of the box lunch version that was a pre-established cohort, which was for the mass timber, which introduces students to the mass timber industry and explores some of the fundamental features and tools associated with mass timber construction. And it had 2 2.5 credit courses. What we've learned through this process so far as our best practices is avoiding fragmentation of full-time programs. When you initially make calls out to departments, oftentimes they're quick to just badge all of their part-time studies courses. And that may not be the best strategy. We're trying to avoid over badging and looking and disassembling our full-time programs as well. Focusing on industry needs, that's one way we've been helping to capture that. Is this a need in industry? Is this a gap that's currently existing before we look to issue a badge or a micro-credential? Keeping entry and laddering and transferability in mind. Obviously to help people get into education that may not be traditional learners, and also to further their education and capture their work experiences as a proud learning assessment, as well as new ways to expand their profession that they already exist in. Align with common post-secondary practices, such as the recently announced Ministry Micro-Credential Framework. Centralizing oversight and strategy, which is the Agile and Work Integrated Learning Department, which I've been involved with. And also what's been helpful is to issue faculty and staff badges and micro-credentials with your own internal professional development so that they experience what it's like and get a little more excited about doing similar for their students. So I look forward to questions about how BCIT implemented their micro-credential and Agile initiative framework. And thank you for your time.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And now it is my pleasure to welcome Eric Fry from BCIT and Ed Benoit from CNC, who are here to answer your question. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Mike.
All right, we've got quite a few questions in the chat, so I'm just going to get right to it. This question is for you, Eric. Is there a standard definition of micro-credentials, or does it vary from school to school?
Well, I think there's obviously some variation, and we certainly have one we're working with, but the Ministry of Advanced Education has the framework they've put out, and it has a definition that says micro-credentials recognize standalone, short-duration learning experiences that are competency-based, aligned with industry, employer, community, and or Indigenous community needs, and can be assessed and recognized for employment or learning purposes.
Okay, so in terms of, we have a question here from Thomas Gomes, who is from Ascenda School of Business. How closely are we evaluating, monitoring, or linking the micro-credentials pathway with the educational quality assurance procedures for program development, delivery assessments, and review? Ed, what do you think about that?
Well, that's the big question, I think, at this point. So the provincial framework is under development and was informed really by our collective experiences through the first round of the micro-credential offerings that were where the call took place last fall, and they were implemented earlier this year. I would say, as I mentioned I can speak for CNC, as I mentioned in the presentation, we approached the first round of the micro-credentials that we offered through our existing credential policy. We used the statement of completion, which isn't something that is, it's not a credential that is reviewed by Education Council. However, I think one of the real strengths and benefits of the micro-credential initiative is that it has allowed an opportunity for almost a form of action research into this realm of micro-credentials. So we've been rolling out some of this short-term competency-based skills training to meet the needs of employees and employers, at the same time that we're gathering feedback from employers and participants and participating at the provincial level to help work towards defining that micro-credential framework, which will in turn, I think, inform much of what our individual institutions are doing. So yes, there will be a quality assurance component to it, and the details, I think we're seeing a little bit of variation from school to school. If it's a credential, many schools would require it to go through the regular kind of approval processes. If it's a non-credit micro-credential, then there's usually alternative forms of quality assurance and approval processes that go along with those.
Thanks for that, and I think that's really a useful clarification on that question. I have a question for you, Eric, and it kind of relates to something that you talked about how you're at BCIT, you have badges and you have different types of credentials. There's a question from Dezeen Huber from the University of Northern British Columbia, where he says that there seems to be an issue regarding the definitions. For instance, are micro-credentials related to current continuing studies options? Are they short courses that are maybe 1 credit that are part of an existing degree? Or are they badges within existing courses that certify that a student has demonstrated a mastery of a skill? I wonder if you can maybe elaborate a little bit on that. Like, how do you interpret what micro-credentials are?
Well, they're shorter. I mean, that's generally what it comes down to, right? That we always had our statements of completion previously, as Edward just had explained as well, and ours are for credit and have been for credit. They are generally for achieving a skill that's meeting an industry need. That's what we're using as our criteria when ideas come forward. Is this meeting an industry or community need? The fact that they stack and provide new opportunities to ladder into our existing programs, or sometimes to complement our existing programs, or for after our existing programs, that's sort of how they all fit together. But ultimately, it's competency-based, developing a skill in a bite-sized piece that's a benefit and a need for industry.
And I'm going to ask this next question. It's from Sarah Greeland from Coast Mountain College. And this is actually a question for both of you, but we'll start with you, Ed. Do students have to apply to graduate with a micro-credential? So basically, how are the completions of a micro-credential assessed?
In our experience up to this point, they would not have to apply because we're using the statement of completion, which is a currently existing credential and doesn't require an application for graduation. Now, as we move forward and as Our institutional credential policy perhaps is revised and elaborated to make space for different forms of micro-credentials. And as the provincial framework is pointing in the direction for both credit and non-credit micro-credentials, it's a good question. If we're looking at, a micro certificate, for example, that maybe exists somewhere beneath associate certificates at given institutions, does that require an application for graduation? Perhaps. I think in my experience and in our experience at CNC, that I think is still under definition at this point. We haven't got that far down the road yet. And nor do I think the provincial framework has kind of arrived at those specific kinds of definitions. For those of you who have reviewed the provincial framework, you'll notice there are certain areas that have a little asterisk beside them, which indicate that there's further work required and that it's still under development. So some of these definitions are in progress as we speak, and we're moving towards, I think, a clearer picture of what micro-credentials could be, but they're not fully formed everywhere at this point, and they're certainly not standardized across the schools or across the colleges within the province at this stage.
I want to ask that question to you also as well, Eric, at BCIT, because there's so many different schools and so many different departments. How are micro-credentials or the badges that are being awarded, how is completion being assessed at BCIT?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one we are also working through different strategies on. But we're treating them like statements of completion, which have always been issued by the departments that are delivering the courses. So following that similar format, when a course is completed, we have a way of extracting the course codes from our student records, and it goes through a portal where the department reviews it, makes sure that especially when badges are being stacked, a simple badge as course finishes, goes through the portal and it issues the badge through Badger. But when you have multiple courses, like some of our courses where you had to take 4 of 10 options, when you had the 4, you got the micro-credential. Somebody's eyes have to go through it and ensure from the department that knows the specific courses that those are the ones that have been completed, and the badge will be issued through Badger.
And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about Badger. Why did BCIT choose to use Badger as a tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. We wanted to make sure that we had something that was recognized and externally. Certainly, that industry can make badges for Badger. Other post-secondaries can use badges through Badger. Other learning management systems can be exporting badges into Badger into the backpack. The students can have a lot of mobility with that. That's certainly one of them. And the other one too is we wanted to ensure it was coming from our from our final grades rather than our learning management system, because there's sometimes variables that may create differences between our learning management system final grade and the grades that's submitted, marks, meetings, etc., like things like that. So we wanted to just have a credential that the department, that the administrative side of the department could issue separately based off of our student records, and that was transportable for that laddering into other opportunities for the students.
All right, thanks for that. So we have another question here from Kathleen Lewis from the University of Victoria. She would like to hear more about how micro-credentials can fill the gap between the different credential levels. Are micro-credentials being used in that way at CNC?
Not yet. I would like to see us move in that direction and see the internal conversations around micro-credentials. I think Eric outlined it well in his presentation around, he used the analogy of a menu and where micro-credentials could serve as appetizers or side dishes or desserts, really. So as pieces that could stand alone as skills training for larger credentials, pieces that you could take on the side while you're doing a regular credential, and then sort of finishing pieces that you might take after you complete a larger credential. Where I would like to see us heading, and where I think the provincial framework allows us to move and sort of points in the direction, is that yeah, there would be small competency-based pieces of training that within a credential policy would not be as extensive as a certificate or a diploma or even an associate certificate, and that they're smaller pieces of learning that individuals could take who are either already working. Maybe they can stack them together into a micro certificate or whatever the name of the credential might end up being. But that's how I see. That's how I would see them. I don't see them as replacing degrees or diplomas really in any sense. I see these as smaller pieces that perhaps could be stacked to create some laddering opportunities. But to be honest, I don't really see somebody completing an entire degree through, a series of badges and micro-credentials. That's not really where I imagine this going.
Yeah, that would be a lot of educational appetizers to take the metaphor from Eric's presentation. Eric, I got a question for you. This one comes from DJ from Western Community College. And he's asking about if micro-credentials are designed for short duration, then how do you integrate the practicum part of a program? So BCIT has a lot of practicums and a lot of hands-on training. How has BCIT dealt with that when it comes to the creation of your short-term programs?
To this point, we haven't included a work integrated learning like in the work site type practicums. We certainly are a very hands-on institute, and we have lots of shops and labs and stuff where those hands-on skills are developed. Remembering that ours are up to 9 credits for micro-credential, that's less than 150 hours of time. So all those work integrated learning opportunities we do here at BCIT are certainly substantially longer than that and involve going into industry, which these would be too small for.
Okay, and then we have a question that's specifically about CNC. You've talked a little bit, Ed, already about statements of completion. The question is the statement of completion from continuing education at CNC included in the transcript along with credit-based courses and credentials?
At this time, no, I don't believe it is. It exists as a standalone credential at this point.
All right. And what about a BCIT? Is it the same there?
Same as well, yes.
Okay. All right. And then there's a question from Andrea Sanderson. Can safety tickets be packaged into a micro-credential, or is that considered out of scope? So maybe I'll ask that one to you, Eric. I think safety tickets, are you familiar with safety tickets?
I understand, yeah, things like WMIS, things like certifications such as that, hoist safety, things like that. Yeah, I think those are good opportunities for that, especially when you're thinking about onboarding people into a trade area. You might have a situation where you have, laborers in construction doing micro-credential on several safety aspects like cranes, work around heavy machinery, and WMIS, bundling those into a micro-credential so they can go out into industry and then they go into their apprenticeships or further education from that point. So in some cases it is about double dipping, especially if there's an industry certificate that comes with that as well. But that, as far as BCIT is concerned, we have our credential, and if they're getting another credential with that other industry as a result of ours, that's fine.
Yeah,
right, go ahead. Yep.
Sorry, I would agree with Eric. Oftentimes for those kinds of industry certifications, there's a recognized industry kind of third-party provider. And often that's the certification that employers would be looking for. So you could perhaps put those together into a micro-credential that's issued by the school. But at this stage, I think often what the employers are looking for are those industry recognized third-party certification organizations anyway. So yeah, I think at least right now in our current state, that tends to be what they're looking for. So if it's, first aid, for example, they would be looking for either, occupational first aid or Red Cross, perhaps, as the certifying body.
All right. Well, we are now at 12:15. I would just want to thank you both for both your presentations as well as this conversation. I think this has been very informative. We've had a very active question and answer in the chat. So I just want to thank you both for your time today and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And then for everybody else that's online, just a couple of housekeeping notes. We are obviously at lunchtime. So what we are going to be resuming at 1 o'clock with a session on pathways. You'll want to tune in for that. In the meantime, please note that the photo contest is still running and the cutoff time is 1 o'clock. So if you'd like to post a picture or vote on the winners, please do so in the community section. I also want to remind people that there is a job posting board there, and there have been a few job opportunities in the system that have been posted. So you might want to make sure you check those out as well. We will be back at 1 p.m. and I will see you then.